It could be the best thing to happen to Eastern Kentucky since roads. Good evening. From WYMT Mountain News, I'm Neil Middleton. Thanks for joining us tonight, and for those watching on the web, thanks for logging on to WYMT.com. State, local, and federal leaders say this project is unlike anything we've seen in Eastern Kentucky in the last 50 years. This project is the cornerstone of an effort to attract high-tech, good-paying jobs to the region in the very near future. The chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, is in Eastern Kentucky today to get a first-hand look at efforts to bring super high-speed internet access to every home and business in the region. Tom Wheeler and 5th District Congressman Hal are our guests tonight as we discuss the future of economic revival in Eastern Kentucky. That's coming up on Issues and Answers, the Mountain Edition.
Issues and Answers, the Mountain Edition, is sponsored by the City of Hazard. Come home to the mountains.
And gentlemen, thanks for joining us tonight. Good to see you, sir.
Neil, great to be here.
Good to see you again, Congressman. Chairman Wheeler, what do you hope to learn from your visit today, and why are you touring Eastern Kentucky?
Well, I'm touring Eastern Kentucky because Hal Rogers asked me to be here. And, you know, that's an important thing, and the leadership that he has shown on these issues has just been phenomenal. But I've been learning a lot here in Eastern Kentucky. You know, it's one thing, in Washington, you talk about concepts of how broadband can change the way people live their lives. I've come to Eastern Kentucky and seen in real life how that's happening, thanks to Congressman Rogers.
Well, you stopped by the People's Rural Telephone Cooperative in Jackson County this morning. It's the first certified gigabit community in Eastern Kentucky. What was your impression? What did you take away from that visit?
Well, think about it, that what we're talking about is what they have done is to connect all of the homes and businesses to high-speed fiber optic cable, so that they are now part of the worldwide internet in a way that creates jobs, helps with education, helps with health care, and allows consumers all kinds of choices in terms of the information that they get. And they did this in an environment where they average 7 homes a mile. That's a high-cost kind of a situation, but they had the leadership, they had the vision to do this, and the community is benefiting. We heard of 150 new jobs that have been created this year in Jackson County just as a result of the new high-speed fiber.
And Congressman, when we're losing so many jobs in Eastern Kentucky, 150 jobs, that's impressive.
It is, and in a very small county, a very small populated county. It's phenomenal. But that's the potential that's there. I've been preaching till I'm hoarse about the benefits of cable, high-speed, high-capacity cable. Those jobs are the most important thing to me. Now, others, the most important part of it is classroom, health issues, hospitals, clinics. But the jobs that can be there, we've got a few hot spots with cable now. For example, in Williamsburg, they've got cable there. We were able to bring the U.S. State Department there, and that's now the processing center for all the visas of the State Department in the world at Williamsburg. Same thing sort of in Mount Vernon, where we've got hundreds of jobs digitizing for the Veterans Administration the service records of people applying for disability. And I could go on. So those jobs can be ours with high-capacity, high-speed cable. In McKee, as the chairman has said, these are people who are working at home for national companies. And also, as the chairman pointed out to me privately, there's another big example is people with disabilities who are homebound will now be able to work with this at-home capability.
Chairman, are you seeing successful networks like this in other rural parts of the country?
Yes, but we need to do more. It's that simple. You know, what broadband does is to become a great leveler. And if you can do in Williamsburg or McKee or elsewhere the same kind of things that you used to have to do in a major urban market. You can change the economics, not just for the people who live there in McKee or Williamsburg, but the people who can benefit from those services and the fact that they're done more efficiently in a more cost-efficient manner all over the country.
Congressman, in today's economy, high-speed internet is no longer a luxury. I think we would all agree with that. It's as essential to a community as water and electricity. However, here in Kentucky, we rank 46th in the nation in high-speed internet availability. 23% of Kentuckians have no access to broadband, and only 50% of Kentucky households use broadband internet service at all. So talk about the Kentucky Wired project, something you've been talking about with SOAR, or as you like to call it, this super highway. How will this help reshape our region and create the jobs that we so desperately need, like the ones you talked about in Jackson County earlier today?
Well, I think we can duplicate what has been done in Jackson County area-wide, statewide even. That's the goal of the Kentucky Wired project, and it's got some legal questions they're having to settle, but the new governor is all excited about it and bringing it to eastern Kentucky. That's my primary interest, of course, and we met, in fact, this morning with the gentleman who's the Secretary of Finance for the state under the new governor, who's in charge of the project on the state level, and he and the chairman are now talking, and have been, frankly, for some time. So the chairman of the FCC, this has been his big thing all of his career, was bringing cable to rural areas. So he's the world's expert on this, and he also happens to be the guy with the levers of power on it. So we're looking a lot to the chairman and the FCC to help us with this project, and they already have been. But I'm thrilled that the commissioner, the chairman, was able to come down and see firsthand what's happening and to give us his advice and answer questions.
You mentioned Governor Bevin. Last week, Governor Bevin told the SOAR Executive Committee that he wants to downsize the scope of the Kentucky Wired project, but he said that he still doesn't support installing the network in eastern Kentucky, but says the project is somewhat off track. What does this mean for the project? People see that headline and they think, uh-oh, is this project in trouble? So what does it mean for the project, and what do you see as the timeline for implementation?
The original idea that I took to the then governor was to bring cable to East Kentucky, essentially my district. And Governor Beshear was excited about that, as were the leaders in the legislature and the like. They wanted also to take it statewide. And frankly, I said, okay, it's fine with me. If you've got the money, I've got the time.
Right.
So that's sort of where it evolved. But now this governor is determined to run it in East Kentucky, the original concept.
Which is the first priority.
First priority, and frankly, the only priority. That was my original idea, and so we're back to that. The project in East Kentucky is going to go. The rest of the state, you know, he's trying to scale that back some. Whatever he does on that is up to him. I just want East Kentucky.
When do you expect to see this project, the portion in eastern Kentucky, when will it be completed?
If they go according to the original plan, it'll be roughly a year and a half or 2 years. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to predict.
Chairman, what do you think about this Kentucky Wired project? I know you and the Congressman have been together today, and I'm sure today wasn't the first time you've talked about it, but what do you think about this idea to bring the high-speed internet access to eastern Kentucky and possibly all 120 Kentucky counties?
Well, Neil, I can tell you the first time after I took office and I sat down with Chairman Rogers, he says, I want to talk to you about what we're going to do in eastern Kentucky with high-speed connectivity, and so you know, I've been a believer in what he's been doing and what you all have been building here for some time. But this is crucial. I mean, let's stop and think about it. High-speed broadband connectivity is the most powerful communications platform mankind has ever seen. You know, it changes the way we do everything. And one of the fascinating things the congressman was pointing out earlier today at another meeting, the networks of the past always took things and moved them out. They took the coal and they moved it out. People followed it out. Now we got a network that brings things in. And that the work that used to get sent out now can be done here because information is the asset of the 21st century. And information can be moved anywhere by a high-speed network. And so here you have the possibility to change the economic equation and start bringing opportunity in rather than sending it out. That's a huge step forward for people.
And Congressman, that's one of the problems we've had just because of our area and the terrain. Some areas have really good roads, 4-lane roads, and some are limited. They're literally landlocked by mountains and roads. This super highway bypasses those obstacles.
You're exactly right, and that's what the chairman has said. Really, we've been hampered all of our time in East Kentucky with difficult terrain, and these mountains are not dirt; they're rock. So to build a sewer line or a water line through solid rock is very, very expensive, or a highway for that matter. So we've been hampered by a lot of obstacles that we could not overcome. But with the cable, the network, you jump across those mountains and it levels the world. They're no longer obstacles. You don't need barge lines, you don't need railroads, you don't need airplanes, you don't need trucks. You need access to the internet where you get your raw material and where you ship out your finished product. And the beauty of it is that can be done anywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. And it can be done in Jackson, Kentucky, as well as it can be done in New York City. So anymore, hopefully, we're not going to have to leave home to find work. I had to go to Cincinnati, my dad to Akron, and everybody else had to go somewhere at one point in time. This way, we can work at home, stay in our home area where we want to be, and make a good living. You
could literally work for Google or Apple as a developer and live in Hazard or Harlan or Pineville or wherever.
In fact, this morning over in McKee, EXEP was telling us there's 150 new jobs in Jackson County working for people like Google and Hertz Rent-A-Car, and who are the others?
And U-Haul,
yeah.
And all the big hotels. I mean, and this is the great thing, too. I mean, you pick up the phone or you get online and you want to get some support. The internet made it possible for people in Bangladesh to do that. Why don't we make people in Jackson County have the ability to do that? And that's the great thing that is happening.
Congressman, there are a number of these businesses that are hiring. We've got a new startup over in Pikeville that are hiring laid-off coal miners. Is this the future of where we're going?
Oh, I think so. No doubt about it. In fact, there's as you pointed out, a new company in Pikeville,
BitSource?
BitSource,
yeah. That are hiring laid-off coal miners, and they're training them to do coding, which is the programming of computers and the internet. So yeah, that's where we're going, and frankly, we've got a talented workforce, trained, equipped, not on drugs, competitively wage scaled, that are daring to go to work at home, and they'll give you a really hard day's work for the pay because they want to be sure that that job stays here in Kentucky where they want to live. So I think that's where we're headed.
Now, does this also, when you bring in high-speed internet, and I'll start with you, Congressman, and then Chairman, I'd like you to jump in from what you've seen in other areas, but you bring in high-speed internet and it creates those new types of jobs, the new technology jobs. But does that also set the foundation to help this area start bringing in maybe some of the more traditional jobs that we've looked for that we haven't been able to bring in?
Well, I think so, absolutely. And I think the more that you're able to prove that you can do these things, as we're proving in Williamsburg and Mount Vernon and other places where we have high-speed cable, the bigger companies, I think, will follow that here and see the work ethic that we have, which is great, and the low wage scale, and the accessibility through the high-speed, high-capacity internet. We can't lose.
You know, over in Tennessee, VW made a decision to build a new plant because of access to high-speed internet, because they have to manage all their parts coming from all around the country and around the world. And then Amazon says, we're going to build a new facility there too, because they've got access to everything. But, you know, it's not just that, Neil. Think about the opportunities that are created for our young people by the fact that they now have opportunities to expand their learning, to go on virtual field trips to places that they could only imagine, to look at courses that are online from the best professors of the topic in the world, and not just to look at them like you can with a piece of videotape, but to interact with the professors. And the opportunities that exists. And then the other thing that follows with that is that these kids, as they're having these daily classroom experiences with connectivity, are, oh, by the way, getting educated for the skills they're going to have to exist in that online world. So this is opening up a great new day.
And you know, Neil, there's any number of things that can take place. We will be limited only by our imagination. Anything you want to do, you can do it with the capability that we're going to have. Just for example, this morning in McKee, Jackson County, they were telling us, the school superintendent was saying, on the snow days when they can't make it to school, they've got it rigged so that they can do it by computer, by the internet. Kids can stay at home, do their lessons just like they were in school, and not miss those school days.
Chairman, the FCC has authorized a number of rural broadband experiments. What have you learned, and how can that help areas like Eastern Kentucky? What have you learned from
That's
this?
a great question, Neil, because you know the first option and the preferred option is, how do you help the companies that have been providing basic connectivity, basically phone service, upgrade? And so we have a program called the Universal Service Fund that supports that activity.
Now, most people, when they hear that Universal Service Fund, they're going to say, yeah, I see that on my bill, it's a tax or something. Explain a little bit about where that money goes.
It's a great question. So every American has a little line item on their phone bill that is a universal service fee that comes to the FCC, and that we then distribute. And we use it for providing connectivity to rural areas, to high-cost areas. Over in McKee, we spend about $7 million a year to make sure that fiber optic network is available. We spend about $500,000 a year to make sure that the kids in the school have connectivity and Wi-Fi. We take this money in Kentucky, by the way. You said, yes, Kentucky is like 47th in the country in terms of access to broadband, but Kentucky is a net receiver of funds. The citizens of Kentucky get about $84 million more from this fund every year than they put into it. But to go back to your other question, so we want to say, how do we use that fund to first create opportunities to support companies to upgrade to broadband? But if they don't, we'll look for alternatives, and we'll say, are there other ways that can be done? Can the electric co-op that's run fiber to control their electric system, can that fiber also carry broadband for consumers and businesses? Can wireless do it? Are there other ways of getting out? Because the goal is to provide service to everybody.
Congressman, you've talked about, as this Kentucky Wired project goes, you've talked about that last mile of getting this to our homes and to our businesses. How important is that last mile, and explain a little bit for people how we're going to pay for that?
Well, that's a really good question. What we're talking about doing essentially is building what I would compare it to as an interstate highway, the trunk. And there will be exits to certain counties or communities where there will be provisions made for them to hook up to the interstate highway at their own expense or somebody else's expense. So that's the last mile. But we will be providing the main trunk, the main interstate highway. How do we afford, how do we pay for hooking up a particular community to the trunk line? Well, in many cases, you'll be working with a local telephone cooperative, like we met with this morning, People's Telephone Company in McKee. There are others like that will provide that so-called last mile. Where that's not so, we do have, SOAR has what's called KARD, a Kentucky Appalachian Regional Development Fund, out of which they can make grants to help communities hook up to the system. So there's a variety of ways that will take place. But essentially, it's going to be up to the local community to figure out which the way they want to go in hooking up to the interstate highway.
Okay. Congressman, last week we had some trouble. Well, we continue to have troubling news for eastern Kentucky when it comes to coal mining. We've now lost more than 11,000 jobs in the state since 2009. Congressman, last week you announced a new bill that will accelerate access to about $1 billion in abandoned mine land funds that could send about $20 million a year to Kentucky over the next 5 years. Explain a little bit about that and what that's going to mean specifically for this region.
Well, it could mean, as you say, about $20 million a year that the state will have to reclaim old abandoned mines that existed before 1977. But in this bill, if it passes, that money will have to be used in order to create jobs. Not just cleaning up the site, but perhaps repairing the land adjacent to it for a new shopping center or a factory location or whatever. Economic development and jobs. Now, that bill has to pass. We've got good support. I've got the White House supporting it and across the aisle. But it still has to be passed by the House and Senate and signed by the President in very difficult political times. So it's great, but it's not quite there yet, but I'm working on it.
Okay. Chairman, I couldn't let you come on this program without asking you this question, because it's one of the most asked questions in our region, and that's when will WYMT get on satellite? You know, many of our people do not have access to cable television. The only way they can watch WYMT is online, and that's if they have good internet service, which many of them do not. That means they have to rely on news stations, television stations 2 hours away or even out of state, and we all know that's not local news. So first, I want to thank you for looking at the satellite market mod rules. Our company's very excited about that, and we believe we're going to be able to use that to hopefully get WYMT on satellite so that we can reach our entire region and our viewers and help us be better public service. Explain a little bit about how those mod rules are going to work and how important you think it is for stations like WYMT to be able to be on satellite so customers and people have access to their local news.
That's a great question, Neil. And you know, the news in Lexington is different from the news in Hazard.
And the weather.
And the weather, that's for sure. And so this took an act of Congress to fix. Because the way the law was originally set up, there were situations, there were so-called orphan counties where you weren't in the right broadcast area to be able to get on the satellite. So Congress changed the law, and it fell to us to then implement it. And this now becomes, you talk about modules, this becomes a question of satellite capacity, and working with the satellite providers to make sure that they understand that it's now possible for them to deliver to Perry County. And we have begun that process. We're working through that process. I'm encouraged at the response of the satellite providers. I wish I could give you the exact answer as to when it's going to happen for you, but I think we got an important process underway to attack that problem, because that's a problem that shouldn't exist in the first place.
But you do believe it will happen, like for WYMT and other stations like us across the country?
I think it's going to happen across the country. Believe me, I go to multiple cities like this, and everybody's saying, "How come I can't be on a satellite?" Now, like I say, there's a satellite capacity issue. We've got to work our way through that. But no longer do you have law and regulation holding you back.
Well, first of all, again, let me just say thank you, because that's good news for us, and that's good news for our region, and I'm sure the congressman would agree with that.
Yeah.
We have just a couple of minutes here, so let me get both of you to just sum up what you feel the importance of this broadband initiative is for Eastern Kentucky. And Chairman, I'll start with you.
Well, we've lived through 4 great network revolutions. I say the printing press was the first one. It was the original information revolution. Then we had the railroad that brought us the industrial revolution. Then we had the telegraph, which changed the nature of media and allowed companies to organize. This is the 4th great network revolution in history. And it's the greatest revolution, and it has the greatest potential. And it has to start with everybody being connected to high-speed broadband. That means we've got to build the new infrastructure. And that's the great thing that is happening here in Eastern Kentucky, thanks to Congressman Rogers' leadership.
Congressman, we've got about 30 seconds.
Oh, boy.
Sorry.
Well, what motivates me are the jobs. What motivates me is the fact that I had to leave Wayne County after high school, go to Cincinnati, trying to find a job. My dad before me, in the 20s, had to go to Akron, Ohio, looking for a job. We've depopulated Appalachia. What's motivated me all of my adult life, really, is trying to reverse that, to try to bring jobs here so we could keep our people here where they want to be and turn that talent to the betterment of our region rather than Ypsilanti, Michigan. So that's where I am. And I see in the cable, the capacity cable, the chance for us to bring those jobs here and not ship our people there.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank
Neil,
you very much.
thank you
Pleasure
very much.
to meet you. Good to see
Neil,
you again,
good to see
Congressman.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us here for Issues and Answers in the Mountain Edition. We hope to see you again next week. Have a great evening. Good night.
Don't miss